Before I start, just to give you a bit of recap. So our initial plan that's captured in the click-stop-0 document is to come up with a very basic component in the system that's gonna do little perturbance to the existing configuration model, the existing CRDs, existing tooling, and just be a component on top until it can become like the V1 proper. And the most interesting thing about this is essentially a component that's going to be synchronizing data from a set of publicly visible CRDs, essentially our public API, to an internal set. And this approach kind of allows us to have a very little perturbance in the existing system, existing components, from switching to a Galley-based model to a non-Galley-based model. So, that's kind of the alpha story we have. So the idea is by the time Istio V1 ships, we expect Galley to be in alpha mode, and it will be an alpha feature of Istio. So people should be able to switch over back and forth easily. Once we bake it enough and make it like a release-worthy component, then it will become part of Istio proper, and we have a very easy integration story at that point as well. So there's little perturbance in the existing model, existing glide path of the system. And the basic idea is based on a controller model, like a standard pattern where we read a bunch of resources from the API server, like from CRDs, and then kind of populate another set from which the components can actually read. So the components, all they need to do is, instead of pointing to one set of CRDs, point to another set partitioned by some mapping model. So the basic idea is I actually created a prototype for this, and it is like a very raw prototype. I hope everybody can see my screen. So it's checked in, by the way, into the Galley branch. If you go to the Galley branch of Istio and go to the Galley folder, you can find all the code that I'm about to show you there. So just to get things started, actually, again, this is a very raw demo. I'm hoping that everything is going to go well. So all I did is I actually switched to Istio.io, Istio Galley command, and Galley server. And I did a go build. That builds the binary. Takes a while. And then some more. Okay. Okay, so so these are the command line flags that I'm using just to make sure that we can see some interesting stuff. Logging to standard error, like I'm debugging, like logging out the debugging stuff. And I just need to specify the config file because I am running this locally instead of this being in a cluster. So if you look at this, there's a bunch of available commands now. Just to quickly go through them. Copy does a one-time operation. Delete just cleans up resources. But the most interesting things are init, server, and types. So types just gives us the existing CRDs in the system, right? So as you can see, all of these are like standard CRDs that we have, all are under the config.istio.io API group. So the first thing that we need to do is just initialize the system, which essentially effectively creates a copy of the existing CRDs. So this is just going to go and pretty much do that. And if I do types again, now I can see both the public types as well as the internal ones. And from here on, I can actually start the system by typing server. But before doing that, I just want to show that there's no trickery here. So I switched to my other screen to use kubectl. So I'm in the Istio system. I'm just going to get a bunch of attribute manifest from the config Istio.io API group, right? So there's the Istio proxy and Kubernetes. So if I actually do this for the internal one, they're going to be empty. So I'm going to switch here. I'm going to do the server one. And it's going to start immediately syncing from one end to the other one. So I'm just going to let it to quiesce. Okay, I think we're there. And if I do the same thing again, now you can see the resources being duplicated there. Just to show that we have full CRUD capability, I'm just going to do I'm gonna actually create my own little attribute manifest. So it has an origin IP and value type. So kubectl creates file. If I do that, you will notice that that actually was added by the system. Our Galley actually picked it up, and we can actually check if it is in there. Yep, it is in there. It's created. If we can actually see what the contents are. Describe. And expected. It has origin IP. Okay, so let's do something a bit different. So let's actually replace this with let's change this, right? So instead of origin IP, we have destination IP now in attributes, right? So it's a little change. So let's do kubectl place plot2. Of course, you have to write it correctly first. Okay, so it's doing some reinitialization, but if you notice there's a modified entry here, it actually picked it up. It was able to modify. Sorry. Let's do it again. Yep, it's now destination IP. It used to be origin IP. Now it's destination IP. And finally, just to complete the experience, let's try to delete this. Oops, I actually deleted the wrong one. But so I deleted the internal one. But trust me when I say, it would have deleted it. Okay.
So probably you create that one external one again and then do a deletion.
Yeah, so it actually it detected the incoming event, said deleted. It's tried to delete, but error during synchronization, it couldn't actually find the target one. So
yeah, because that's not the one you want.
So which means we actually have error handling. So
that was really part of the demo.
Sure, I'll go with that. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think we're just gonna productionize this and ship it.
So we welcome everybody to try it, and I think Oz will send out the instructions for try it. Actually, I tried it myself. I have some questions, so we can talk offline.
Okay, so I'm not sure if everybody can hear you, but yeah, okay. I mean, so.
Any other questions? No. So thank you.
What's the next steps then for this? Do we think just generally make sure it's working with people trying it out?
Yeah. So the one thing I am a bit worried is like, okay, we are doing this and we are not getting any feedback either, which means either people are like 100% on board with this idea, which is great, or they are not paying enough attention so that, at some point, somebody's going to come up and say, wait a minute. And that's really the latter thing that I really want to avoid.
Yeah, so my hope is start this conversation with the architecture doc, send that out saying, look, this is what we want to do, this is what we're doing in alpha, and then we'll get the complaints at that point.
Okay.
Broader. and I think what we need to do for this is to make it so it's trivial to enable in alpha.
Yeah.
So somebody can have Istio and just turn it on and nothing happens, right?
Yeah, so that was actually the intent with this approach. I mean, the idea was to, this is very little perturbances in the existing model, easy to opt in, easy to opt out. So I'm hoping that actually satisfies.
That's the goal, yeah. So for alpha, it should be default to off. And that's really what the major requirement.
Yeah, in terms of actual work items, so I started creating a bunch of entries in GitHub issues that are all connected to the same epic. I mean, we can share it as part of nodes.
Could you share it now, the screen?
Sure. It will be like looking at the sausage factory, but okay, hold on. Okay, so 2082 is the main epic that I am using to implement Galley v1. So I created right now.
Not sharing.
Oh, okay, sorry. I stopped sharing. Hold on. Okay, share. Okay. Can you see? Okay. So 2082 is the main epic I am using to track work. I just created a bunch of work at very high level stuff this morning. I think I'll just add a couple of more. So one of the first things that we need to do is design the actual mapping between the public and internal CRDs. In this demo, I have used the different API groups, but there's ongoing work to actually split the CRDs themselves into multiple API groups. So which means the approach that I've shown here is not going to actually directly work. But I think we need to come up with a basic, like a mapping algorithm and define it. And then, you know, the high level algorithm applies. It's just that we need to figure out the right mapping to do now. So one of the other things is we need to make sure that whatever alpha feature enabling model Istio is going to have, Galley needs to be part of it, with the assumption that by the Istio v1 ships, Galley will be still alpha in alpha mode. And then essentially, we need to implement two main components, which the first one is the CRD syncing. So I don't know whether you have noticed, but the set of CRDs are not hardwired in Galley. Actually, Galley knows where to look to find all the CRDs in the system, and then just essentially copies them without really looking in their contents, right? And I think this is, like, for the most part, this is going to work. We need to make sure that we can do this both during the initial deployment of Galley into an existing system, and also during maybe component updates where like CRDs for some of these are things are also changing. So whatever CRD updates, like the public API updates are happening, Galley needs to be on top of it and make sure that it can adapt. And finally, we also need to implement the actual resource syncing, as you have seen now. There are certain things that are missing here. For example, it doesn't do it doesn't try to make sure that those two sets are completely equal. It just listens to events and applies the events on the other side. And as you have seen, it doesn't actually notice that I deleted the internal resource, and which could have caused a problem, right? So there's no remediation factor for these kinds of problems right now. And then finally, we need to just productionize it. Like, we need to put telemetry in this, make sure that we are publishing the right logs, those go to the right place, have documentation, dot the I, cross the T's, those kinds of things.
Okay, so some of the work, if the people want to pick it up, feel free to pick up. If people want to pick up the work with Galley, feel free to pick up those issues and talk to us.
Yeah, so none of these bugs are assigned to anybody right now. So I only assigned the epic myself. So if you're interested in picking up any of these works, just feel free to just sync up with us, and then we can work something out. All right.
Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna see you next week. Thanks for attending. Bye. Oh, by the way, the meeting is recorded. So the whole demo, it was recorded. So I will figure out how to upload to YouTube. Thanks, bye.